They told me grief was the worst pain a parent could feel, but they lied. Losing my son was only the beginning, because the person I trusted most stole everything I had, kicked me out of my own home and smiled while doing it. And just days later, she begged me for help. They say life can change in a single heartbeat. For me, that heartbeat came the night my son, Andrew, died. One phone call, one accident, and everything I believed in, everything I held dear, vanished. I remember sitting in that cold hospital room, staring at the walls, unable to move, unable to speak. The grief was unbearable, suffocating me from every side. And yet, even in that darkness, I thought I had one thing I could hold on to. My family. My son may have been gone, but I thought my wife, my daughter-in-law, the people I trusted, they would be there. They would understand. I was wrong, because the moment I was most vulnerable, the person I had welcomed into my family, my daughter-in-law, Emily, revealed her true face. The one I never saw coming. Sweet, caring, loving, all a mask. She told me my son had left her everything, and then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she locked me out of my own home. $55 million worth of assets, gone. I had been betrayed in the worst possible way by the person I had trusted to honor my son's memory. And as I wandered the streets, broken and humiliated, I knew one thing. This wasn't the end. If was the beginning. Because I was about to learn something every betrayed soul eventually discovers. Pain can fuel a fire inside you, and when that fire meets patience, the world itself can burn. They say nothing prepares a parent for the death of a child, but I thought I was prepared. I had faced challenges before, losses I thought were unbearable, but nothing could have prepared me for losing Andrew. Andrew was more than my son. He was my light in a world that often felt dark. He had a laugh that could fill a room, an energy that made everyone around him feel alive. Every father dreams of seeing their child succeed, of watching them grow, of knowing they've left something meaningful behind. That was Andrew. Then one stormy night, it all ended. I remember the call like it was yesterday. A stranger's voice on the other end, trembling, almost afraid to speak the words. "Mr. Robert, there's been an accident." I didn't hear anything else. My world blurred, my heart froze. My knees gave way and I sank to the floor, barely able to breathe. When I arrived at the hospital, the corridors seemed endless. Nurses and doctors moved like shadows, their faces grim, their words clipped. And then, the room. Andrew was there, lifeless, surrounded by machines that couldn't bring him back. I reached for him, my hands shaking uncontrollably, hoping, praying, pleading, and felt nothing. Grief is supposed to be raw, but this was different. It was a cold, hollow emptiness that ate at my soul. I could feel life slipping away from me too. And then, just as I thought I couldn't sink any lower, Emily appeared. My daughter-in-law. Sweet, gentle Emily. She hugged me tightly, whispered words I wanted to believe. "We'll get through this together, Robert. I promise." At that moment, I thought she was my anchor. I thought I had someone to lean on in the midst of this unbearable storm. I was wrong. 2 days after Andrew's funeral, she revealed the truth in the most heartless way imaginable. She told me that Andrew had left her everything. Not to me, not to anyone else in the family, to her. She said I had no legal claim. She smiled politely, like she was delivering a simple fact of life, not tearing a father's world apart. The next morning, the locks changed. My home, the home Andrew and I had built together over decades, became a prison I was barred from entering. $55 million worth of property, investments, and businesses. Gone. Vanished. I wandered the streets numb and broken. Friends and relatives offered condolences, but no one could give me what I really needed. Justice. My grief was heavy, but the betrayal cut deeper than any wound. I kept asking myself, how could someone I trusted, someone my son loved, do this to me? I had always believed that family stood together through pain, through hardship, through loss. But that belief shattered in an instant, leaving only cold, burning rage and the raw determination to fight back. Because grief alone was not enough. I would not let Andrew's memory be stolen by greed. I would not let this betrayal destroy me completely. This was the moment the fire inside me was lit. After the initial shock of being thrown out of my own home, I began noticing things that didn't add up. Strange withdrawals, unexplained transfers, sudden changes in Andrew's business accounts. At first, I wanted to believe it was a mistake. Maybe grief had clouded her judgment, but deep down I knew better. Emily wasn't grieving. She was calculating. She wasn't desperate. She was planning. I remembered the little things I had ignored before. The way she insisted on handling Andrew's finances, even when he had asked me to guide them. The late-night messages on her phone she guarded so carefully. The sudden friends and advisors who appeared out of nowhere. All of it had a purpose, and now I could see it. One evening I confronted her, hoping against hope that I was wrong. I said, "Emily, as Andrew loved you, why would you do this?" Her smile chilled me to the bone. It wasn't the gentle, comforting smile I had seen at the hospital. This was a controlled, measured smile, one that carried no warmth, only precision. "Robert," she said softly, "everything I'm doing is for us. You just don't understand." It was in that moment I realized the truth. She had been playing me from the start. Every comforting word, every gesture of family concern had been a mask. Behind it was a woman who had spent months, maybe years, planning to take everything from me. I felt rage boiling in my chest, hotter than anything I had ever experienced. But beneath that anger, beneath the betrayal, was a quiet, cold determination. If she thought she could destroy me so easily, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I couldn't confront her openly yet. She had lawyers' connections and a facade of innocence that everyone else seemed to believe. But I didn't need to attack her recklessly. I only needed one thing: proof. So I began collecting evidence quietly. Bank statements, legal documents, secret transfers, even conversations I could record legally. Every detail mattered. Every mistake she had made was a thread in the web I was starting to weave. And while she went about her days, smiling at friends and family, enjoying what she thought was her victory, I watched, I waited, and I prepared. Because I knew something she didn't. Patience could be more terrifying than rage. I also realized revenge wasn't about money alone. It was about truth, about showing her, showing the world, that deceit and betrayal always leave a trace, and in that trace lies the power to turn the tables completely. So I waited, carefully, silently, watching Emily's confidence grow, knowing that every small slip, every hidden secret, would eventually lead her to the edge. Days turned into weeks, and I became a shadow in my own life, quiet, patient, watching, waiting. Every move Emily made I recorded in my mind, like a chess master anticipating the next play. I knew her habits, her routines, even the people she trusted most. Every mistake, no matter how small, was a seed I would later use to grow my plan of revenge. I rented a small apartment, barely furnished, barely enough to survive. But it didn't matter. Material things no longer held me. All that mattered was the truth and the power it could give me. I started quietly tracking her financial movements, noting the subtle transfers she thought no one would notice. There were small inconsistencies in her statements, a hidden account here, a disguised asset there. Greed has a funny way of making people careless, and Emily was no exception. At the same time, I began documenting everything I could about her personal dealings, the people she relied on, the advisors she trusted, even the friends who had been secretly helping her hide Andrew's estate. I had to know everything. Every thread mattered. But I didn't just rely on observation. I built a small network of allies, people who had unknowingly witnessed her mistakes or had grievances of their own. I reached out carefully, making sure no one knew my full plan. Everyone became a silent part of my web. I also realized that revenge isn't always about direct confrontation. It's about creating situations where the betrayer exposes themselves. I needed Emily to make a mistake big enough to be undeniable, and because I knew her, I knew she would. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. She tried to funnel part of the inheritance into an account under her brother's name, thinking no one would ever trace it. It was a careless move, the kind only greed can cause. And it was enough. From that moment, everything changed. I became more deliberate. Every call, every meeting, every transaction she made, I tracked it, waited for the moment when it would all come together. I also learned to control my emotions. At first, the anger and grief made me want to confront her directly, to demand justice in the open. But patience taught me a different lesson. The quiet observer always has the upper hand. Let her think she had won, and when the moment came, the full weight of her betrayal would hit like a storm. During those weeks, I also reflected on Andrew, on his life, his dreams, and how he would have wanted me to handle this. I knew revenge wasn't just about punishing Emily. It was about restoring balance, reclaiming dignity, and showing the world that deceit cannot hide forever. And then, slowly, the plan began to take shape. It was a careful, deliberate strategy, legal, undeniable, and precise. Every action I would take was built on evidence, timing, and her own mistakes. She wouldn't see it coming. She wouldn't expect it. Because while she had underestimated me in her greed, I had underestimated nothing. Not a gesture, not a secret, not a slip. Every seed I planted would grow, and when it did, Emily's empire of lies would come crashing down. I had survived grief. I had survived betrayal. And now I was preparing to survive one more thing, triumph. The day the turning point arrived, it felt like the air itself had changed. Heavier, charged, as if the world was preparing to shift under my feet. I had been patient for months, but patience without action is just wasted time. I needed a crack, a single opening that would let the whole thing collapse. That crack came in the form of an email, buried in a stack of mundane financial records I had managed to get my hands on through a quiet request and a helpful bank clerk who believed me more than he knew. The email was short, almost casual, from one of Emily's distant associates. It mentioned a transfer, a coded reference, and a name. Her brother's name. It was the confirmation I had hoped for and feared in equal measure. I remember my hands trembling as I read it. This little message linked the hidden accounts to people I could subpoena. It connected dots I had only suspected. For the first time, I had proof that could not be waved away as grief-driven paranoia. But proof alone wasn't enough. I needed leverage and visibility. I needed the right people to see the pattern, to follow the money where it led, and to act. So I began to assemble them, a careful selection of lawyers, an investigative accountant, and a reporter who had a reputation for exposing financial crimes. None of them knew the full story when they first came in. I gave them fragments, just enough to wake their curiosity, and they began to dig. The investigator I hired was a quiet man with tired eyes and a talent for numbers. He treated the case like a puzzle, and with every piece he placed, the image of Emily's deception became clearer. He found shell companies, fake invoices, hand advisors who had taken small slices of the fortune in exchange for silence. The walls she had built around her lies were not impenetrable. They were paper-thin when you knew where to look. Meanwhile, the reporter, I contacted, smelled a story and began asking questions in ways I never could. She started with minor inquiries, a question here, an offhand comment there. Emily, confident in her victory, dismissed them with practiced ease. But reporters have a way of asking the right question at the right time, and it only takes one to make the smallest crack widen. I also filed the first of many legal motions that week. Not grand, dramatic gestures, small, surgical strikes that would force disclosures and freeze suspicious assets. My lawyer moved quietly but quickly. We filed for emergency discovery, demanding access to bank records, business contracts, and communications that Emily had hoped would remain hidden. She responded with arrogance at first, her attorneys trying to paint me as a desperate father grasping at straws, but words mean little when papers can be produced in court. The perfect thing about her arrogance was that it made her careless. She started to panic in ways small and predictable. She called old friends, demanded loyalty she hadn't earned, and began making hurried transfers that left new footprints. Every hasty decision was another thread for us to pull. Then one morning, the reporter called me. Her voice was low but electric. "We've got something," she said. Not just whispers. Documents that tie Emily's signature to at least 3 transfers to offshore accounts. I couldn't help the cold rush that ran through me. It was vindication, yes, but it was also fear. Exposure would bring everything into the light. The truth about Andrew's death, the way she had used our grief, the lives she had broken in the name of gain. I thought of Andrew then, and how he would have felt watching this spectacle. Would he be proud that I had fought for him? Or would he be horrified by how far I had gone into the dark to pull this back into the light? Regardless, there was no turning back. The reporter's first piece ran quietly online, a careful, fact-checked article that hinted at a larger scandal. It didn't name Emily at first, but it sent shockwaves through the circles she moved in. Friends began to look at her differently. Advisors started distancing themselves. People who had once called her family now called her the woman involved in the investigation.